when will Trump announce his 2024 presidential bid? I'll start with that.
Is there a follow-up?
There will be a separate question, but I thought I'd just start with that.
Well, he'd like to have done it already. And I give him credit for many things this year, because he's going to end up being a big winner from this election cycle. Try as everybody did to say you nominated the wrong people, you didn't give enough money, you're in the way, go away. Donald Trump in some ways never stopped campaigning from early 2015. First for himself, and in between for many, many different candidates. I mean, unlike Joe Biden, Trump was highly in demand in 2018. I give him a ton of credit for not announcing this year, for not stepping in the way of the midterm candidates, which a lot of people around him who frankly need him for their next meal and their next gig and their next center of power were urging him and begging him and leaking to a lot of you that he would be announcing any moment. I'm glad that he didn't do that. That was certainly my advice from the beginning. Wait until after the midterms, if you do it all. Secondly, I like the fact that he came back to Washington at the end of July, a full year and a half since leaving on January 20th, 2021, and gave a policy speech. It took President Trump an hour and a minute, roughly, to get to the 2020 election in that policy speech at AFPI, which you all covered. And then he went on to CPAC and gave mostly a policy speech. So when he does that, when people hear the binary choice and they're reminded of why his words, "You miss me, don't you?" They'll say, you know what? I'm going to push aside whatever I don't like, and I'm going to vote my pocketbook, my personal liberty, my fear of crime, my frustration with no baby formula on the shelves, rising costs of gas and groceries, which is a 6-month-old conversation. The conversation now is utilities, insurance, rent, mortgage, tuition, student loan payment. So I think you can expect him to announce soon. Obviously, there's a family wedding coming up on his property, and Election Day is late this year. But as he would say, wait and see. So I think you should, maybe keep your cell phone on, and sorry if you made any post-election plans, since these races are never all called in time. There's always a runoff in Louisiana or Georgia, it seems these days, somehow. But he would like to have announced by now, and I think the fact that he hasn't is really a big credit to him and his restraint, and him wanting to help in these midterms and not step on them. He's being urged by some people to still have a surprise, a November surprise. But we're trying to mitigate November surprises for all the candidates and include message discipline. Last point, if and when Donald Trump announces his presidential run, it doesn't scramble the Republican field, it scrambles the Democratic field. I think that's when the George Wills of the world really kick into high gear and say, what are we doing here? We're going to have a cage match, rematch of these two. And I know Ron Klain, Tweeter, Not a Leader, and others like to say, well, we're ready for Trump. We want to run against Trump again. Do they really? Because you've seen the polls, even if not just the rematch polls, the complete, unarguable, indisputable lack of popularity and lack of approval of a sitting president, and frankly, many pieces of his agenda that they've not been able to sell in a way that makes people have confidence in their competence. That's just very clear.
Now, first off, I should say that if Kellyanne Conway is telling the truth, which I understand would be a hell of a leap, then this wouldn't be a huge surprise. Donald Trump has been hinting at running for president since the moment he was forced to leave office. Why? Because he needs the cover of the presidency to protect him from any accountability for his raft of state and federal crimes. I mean, he really appreciates civil service. Honestly, though, the president gave Trump all of the things that he needs to survive. First, he is under investigation for stealing classified documents from the White House, for inciting an insurrection on January 6th, for tax fraud both civilly and criminally in New York, for defaming E. Jean Carroll, and for trying to pressure Georgia's Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger to find 11,780 votes in the Fulton County DA probe. But Trump knows that if he's president, he'll have the best shot at insulating himself from any and all accountability. And there's nothing he'd like more than a get-out-of-jail-free card. And second, he needs adulation. The guy lives and breathes attention. He can't stand not being the center of the universe. Alex Holder, the documentary filmmaker who testified for the January 6th committee, even explained that Trump was in a bad mood and experiencing withdrawals after being barred from Twitter. This is a guy who believes that the sun and the earth revolve around him, and so it shouldn't come as a surprise that he wouldn't want to relinquish the biggest microphone in the world. That's what the presidency is for him, a way to be the main character. Notice too how Kellyanne Conway says that she gives him a lot of credit for not announcing before midterms and, quote, stepping in the way of midterm candidates. If that is not a tacit admission of just how toxic Donald Trump is, I don't know what is. Think about it. If the guy wasn't an albatross around Republicans' necks, what would be the downside of announcing beforehand? If he was really as popular as Kellyanne makes him out to be, really that much of a hero, then wouldn't all those Republicans want him to announce that they could ride his coattails to victory? And so by virtue of her congratulating him on staying in the background, all she's doing is revealing that Trump isn't some silver bullet, he is a drag on the ticket. And the only thing he did right for Republicans was largely stay quiet. Not for nothing, but Donald Trump loves rallies. If all of these MAGA candidates wanted him at their rallies, he'd have come. The fact that he didn't tells you everything you need to know. But here's my favorite part of Kellyanne's answer, and I know this really doesn't have to do with anything, but I damn near fell off my chair listening to her say this.
I like the fact that he came back to Washington at the end of July, a full year and a half since leaving on January 20th, 2021, and gave a policy speech. It took President Trump an hour and a minute, roughly, to get to the 2020 election in that policy speech at AFPI, which you all covered. And then he went on to CPAC and gave mostly a policy speech.
A policy speech. Donald Trump. Trump has been giving policy speeches in the same way that Marjorie Taylor Greene's been giving symposiums on high-energy particle physics. The guy doesn't give policy speeches, he rants about toilets and light bulbs and windmills. Conway says that Trump's been giving policy speeches as if we all haven't been listening to Trump for years, as if we don't know exactly who he is. These people love trying to rewrite history and frame the guy like he's some low-key genius. Dude stared into a solar eclipse and tried to change the trajectory of a hurricane with a Sharpie. He is an abject moron, and no amount of wish casting is going to change that. But look, Donald Trump and his idiocy aside, here's the takeaway from all of this. Trump is laying the foundation for another presidency by creating the Republican Party in his own image. These are people who will do anything and say anything to entrench their own power. People who stand for nothing aside from imposing their edicts onto everyone else. They will ban abortion, ban books, ban Social Security, ban Medicare, ban Medicaid, ban the acknowledgement of the existence of LGBT Americans and your right to vote, and so much more. So if you have any feelings about Donald Trump, just know that while he might not personally be on the ballot in this November election, his philosophy is. So make sure you have a plan to vote, that you bring friends and family to vote, and make sure that Donald Trump and his influence stay as far from the levers of power as is humanly possible. Before you go, if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, please make sure to subscribe to my channel. You can click the thumbnail right here on this screen. And if you want to support my work even further, the best way is to subscribe to my podcast, No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen. There you can check out my interviews with major players in the world of politics, including President Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, Elizabeth Warren, Katie Porter, Jamie Raskin, and so many more. Plus other interviews that live exclusively on the podcast. That link is also right here on this screen, or just search No Lie with Brian Tyler Cohen wherever you listen to podcasts.